Part of Intarsia knitting is a bit of preparation before you start knitting. I spend a lot of time making bobbins. So when you look at this garment, we have larger proportions of some colours, smaller proportions of other colours. You can use a ball of yarn when working larger areas, but for these you'll have much more success at not having your yarns tangle as you knit if you're working this from a smaller bobbin of yarn. So the bobbins, you can buy bobbins in yarn shops, but I was shown how to make bobbins without the physical bobbin by my grandmother many years ago, and the idea is that this is self-tensioning. So this was my original end of yarn, which I'm going to knit from, and I've created a bobbin in a figure of 8 action around my fingers. And then when you break off the yarn, when your bobbin's big enough, you pop the end into this to secure it. So what we're trying to achieve by wrapping the yarn at the very end is tensioning our yarn. So as we knit, the yarn releases, or we can just give it a gentle little tug, and now it comes. The shorter you keep the distance between your knitting needles and your bobbin, the less tangled you'll get in your knitting. So in preparation before knitting a piece, you need to decide, I'll use a ball of yarn, particularly on the front edge, because there'll be less joins, but you need bobbins, certainly a small bobbin for this, small bobbin, small bobbin. You'll find it goes much, much easier. So let me just show you how I make bobbins. So this is just an odd little ball of wool I've got here, which will probably fall off the table, but we'll ignore that one. So this is the end we're going to knit from, and I hold the yarn between my fingers, remembering we don't want to get this into the bobbin that we're making. This will be the end that we're knitting from. So I hold it in my hands and I use my finger and thumb, and what you're doing is a figure of 8. Now I speed up and go very fast, but I'll go very slow to begin with. So it's going under my thumb and round, under, over, under, over. So I've created, I'll show you from another, we've got a figure of 8 happening. Now it doesn't matter how you do this, which fingers you use. I'll show you again, we've got a figure of 8 happening here, round and round. So that's a reasonably small bobbin, and when we slide it off our fingers, you can see from the top, this is a yarn I'm going to finish. The tail of my yarn is still here. We're going to knit from this tail. And when we take the yarn off our fingers, we need to take it by the center of that figure of 8. We're going to secure it with this yarn, being careful not to catch the end we're going to knit from into the tail as we wrap it. So this wrapping of the center of the ball is what's going to tension our yarn as we knit and release. I wrap it a couple of times, very technical, pop your finger in the way, a couple of more wraps round, cut your yarn, and then this is the end we don't want to knit from, so we want to pop that in. So as I take my finger out, I ease that end into there, which will hold it, and now I can work from this end, which I kept out. That will be the end I start my knitting from, and as I knit the bobbin, I'll unwind the bobbin simply by gently pulling on it. As you go, you'll find it gets looser. You'll go back and find this tail, unwind it a couple of times, pop our, give it a little tug, tighten it up, put our finger in the way, and again take the end that we don't want to be knitting from into it. You can make bobbins of different sizes. You can go quite big. You can mimic this from a ball of wool, and you can pull the ball of wool. You can start it from the center of a standard ball of wool and then use a hair scrunchie around it to keep it firm. Something to stop the yarn rolling away, and you end up with lengths and lengths of yarn, and as you're knitting it gets more and more tangled. I'll go through that once more with you. So this is the end we're going to knit from. I hold that in my fingers to keep it out of the equation. Now I've seen people use all fingers in every direction. Nothing's right or wrong, it's whatever works for you. Figure of 8. So under my thumb, under my finger, under, over is the action. I'll just undo that because I can also show you, so you can see that's nice and big. But if you just want a small one for, say, these bobbles, just hold your fingers closer together and you can make a smaller one. So around our fingers, you can really see how the figure of 8 is created. And if we're just doing, it's probably more than you need for bobbles. It's always better to have more than less, because what we're trying to avoid is too many ends at the same time. So slide it off your fingers, take it by the center of the figure of 8, making sure this end doesn't get caught, because this is the end you're going to knit from. Wrap your yarn to create the tension, put your finger in the path of the yarn, snip your yarn and pull your end through. And we'll be knitting from this end, which is the piece I kept out in the first place, and as we knit and use our yarn and need more, it simply pulls out. So there's no putting your knitting down to unravel a bobbin. So I call these butterflies. If you've got my book Swing Swagger Drape, you'll also find this diagrammed in the back of the book. Hope you enjoy your Intarsia knitting. Bye.